Tier lists. We all love them, and they're a fun way to discuss a wide range of topics in a digestible format. And in this video today, we're going to do just that by discussing all the various character choices in Baldur's Gate 3 by breaking down each one to their subrace and putting it on a tier list. This will go from the standard S rank to C rank, as I believe nothing in this game is a terrible, horrible choice. And on that note, let me open up this video with a huge disclaimer. If you're brand new to the game, then just shut this video down. The character you play should be determined by what you want to play and what you like the look of. You'll be staring at this character for a minimum of 60 hours, so enjoy the power fantasy of whatever you want to create in whatever scope. This list is meant to have some fun rating certain abilities and passives on a scale rather than giving you a sense of dread for playing a specific character that the internet says is not good or something. Every single race in this game can beat the hardest difficulty without problem. The racial abilities just give you a bit more of an edge here and there. Most of them require a long rest and have limited use cases anyway. So please, play your game your way. Your S tier and my S tier are two different things. This should all be taken with a grain of salt or a fun discussion point rather than creed. Also, in my typical fashion of upfronting the knowledge in my videos, you can find the entire list linked below if you just want to look at that. You can also skip around to each choice using the chapters with the timeline and the description. If all you wanted to see was a list, then please feel free to shut the video down. Before you head out, if you find the information in this video helpful, please don't forget to like, comment, or subscribe, as each one of those things helps me out in a huge way. Also, take a look at my Twitch, linked in the comment and description, where I'll be streaming my new Pure Evil run using the new subclasses in patch 8. But let's get started on the ultimate tier list for all races and subraces in Baldur's Gate 3. So we're going to be doing this using the BG3 wiki because it's just easier to talk about every little thing. I was going to do this in the character creator, but it's hard to show all the individual items that the character gets and have it all be succinctly displayed out for you. So the first we're going to start with is the Drow, and it's my favorite race in the whole game, so rightfully it belongs in S tier because it's my choice and it's my list, so this is an S tier. But in all fairness, it's S tier because it has really great things going for it. So it is a medium size race here that gives us 30 feet per turn, or 9 meters, which is really good. Honestly, that is huge, because if you go to play like any of the other smaller races, they lose 5 feet here, not to mention their height. But also you get Drow weapon training, which is going to give you rapiers, short swords, and hand crossbows, all three of which are really good when you're trying to use any kind of finesse weapons that your class otherwise would not get access to. Superior dark vision, so you can see up to 80 feet. Dark vision is one of those things that you either don't care or it's a huge hindrance for you, because it can limit the range in which your character can see certain events like random survival, arcana checks, or actually seeing where things are on the map so they don't actually start a combat for you. But some of the big things that they actually had access to is below. So Fey Ancestry. So they get advantage on saving throws against being charmed or being put to sleep. This is huge because charm is one of the most annoying things that you can have in the game. And most people don't actually have good wisdom on their characters unless they're playing a character that needs it. So getting an advantage against that is quite good. Now, this is going to be contrary to when I talk about gnomes, but still, it's important. Also, you get a free proficiency in perception without having to put any points into it. This is nice because you'll be using this quite a bit throughout random points in the game. It's nice to just have that free proficiency in it. It's going to help you find traps, all sorts of other fun stuff. And then they get some good spells to take advantage of. Dancing Lights isn't too crazy, but it can help you out when you're going through Act 2. It's a nice one to take advantage of. Also, first level, they get access to Fairy Fire, which actually helps you quite a bit in Act 1 when you're doing the hag fight. And it's a great one to use through little portions of the game where you're dealing with things that come in and out of being invisible. This is again going to be really used really well in Act 2 when you deal with shadows that go in and out of being, well, invisible. And then second, we have Darkness. So every single race, well, we've got Darkness. Let me talk about that. Darkness is a really great skill. It blinds things, so you can do a ton of damage to them, and you can take advantage of it if you're playing any kind of class that takes advantage of being obscured, heavily obscured, what have you. So you can take advantage of all three of these spells. Any class or race, that has some form of racial spell will then have a casting modifier attached to it. For the Drow, it's intelligence. So if you're not playing intelligent characters, these might be a little tricky, but the nice thing is most of them they're going to be a little bit easier to get off. They do have, while in sunlight, this creature, this is for NPCs only, but they have a disadvantage on attack rolls and perception checks. You don't need to worry about this. You're not an NPC. Now, they get there's 2 sub-races, which don't give them any real big differences. It's kind of just mainly narrative things. But the biggest thing that they have got going for them is that there is a Drow-specific weapon. Well, not the biggest thing, but some of the big, some other bigger things here. Drow-specific weapon, and there are tons of narrative options throughout the game for Drow that are unique to them. They're a really fun race to play. You have a lot of fun with it. There's a lot of interaction with this race that really makes them stand out. And I like their racial features quite a bit because it makes it so that you can play a lot of different ways to abuse certain things. Like darkness is a really good spell. Having that resistance against charm is really good. Getting an extra proficiency of any kind is amazing. Quick correction here on Drow magic. This is actually charisma based, not intelligence based. I made a mistake earlier. I apologize. I just wanted to make sure that that is correct here for you. That is a charisma-based spellcasting modifier for this, which matches the Tieflings. Now, another big S tier here is the Halfling. Halfling has 2 separate subraces, unlike the Drow, who just has, narrative subraces. There are actual differences in both of these options here. So, for starters, we have the Halfling, who is unfortunately small, so they can only run 7.5 or 25 feet per turn. But they get Halfling luck. This is huge. When you roll a 1 for an attack roll, ability check, or saving throw, you can re-roll the die and must use the new roll. This is huge. This is huge because otherwise you use a feat to get access to this. It's really good. It is, if they had no other capabilities, this would still keep them in the S tier because this ability is so strong. This game is made up of those 3 rolls across everything you deal with: attack, ability, and saving throw rolls. So the fact that you can just re-roll one of them for free without doing anything because you're just a halfling is amazing. Then you also get the advantage on saving throws against frightened. Frightened is a really strong effect that can really shut your character down. Having advantage against it so they don't lose turns is really good as well. But then into the sub races, and again, I've put both in S tier here. We have Lightfoot, so if you want to play a stealthy character, they have advantage on stealth checks. Or if you want to play Strongheart, you get advantage on saving throws against being poisoned and resistance on being poisoned. Poison and fire are 2 of the most prevalent damage types in the game. So to get those re-rolls of the 1s on all of your ability checks, your attack rolls, your saving throws, and then have advantage on your poison damage, or also having advantage on stealth rolls, those 2 things play hand in hand together. It's why this is such a strong race. Now, you have to stomach playing a halfling, which means you've got hairy feet, just like myself, so you must enjoy it. And that is like the only downside of being a halfling, is that you look like one. But if you, like I said, have hairy feet, you'll already be at home. So this is another S tier here with the halfling. And of course, the most prevalent of all races in the game is human. You'll encounter these quite a bit. You are one right now. My personal opinion is when I'm playing a video game, I either want to play a human, like I played World of Warcraft for tons and tons of years, and yeah, you guessed it, I played a human. But a lot of people find it pretty boring to play humans, so they try to choose something that's pretty similar to them. So they're like, oh, I can relate to that because I look like that. Humans in this game, though, are great because they are medium-sized, they move 30 feet per turn, all that kind of action. They get a ton of weapon proficiencies. So if you're a wizard, you still get access to spears, pikes, halberds, glaives, light armor, and shields playing a human. There's a great benefit there. But the human, for me, sits in a B tier because the only other thing they get is a human versatility, which is an additional skill to be proficient in, which is nice. In addition, that you also get your carrying capacity is increased by 1/4. Those things are great, but they're also like, if your character cannot be proficient in other things that are really good, then you're like, okay, I went from being proficient in history and survival to history, survival, and arcana, all 3 of which aren't amazing things to be proficient in. And when it comes to civil militia, spears, pikes, halberds, and glaives are all very specific style of weapons that you have a very specific style of play involved in them. Furthermore, there aren't many of those weapons available to you in the game. The biggest benefit here is the carrying capacity increased by 1/4, because that's just always nice to have more carrying capacity in a game where you know you're going to hoard all your items, because that's just how we all play. And having light armor, because this allows you just to have light armor and say a sorcerer or a wizard where you otherwise wouldn't have access to it. So it's nice to turn that on. But it's also an armor type that is turned on for almost everyone else. So it's just kind of one of those ones where I feel like most of the stuff that makes humans particularly stand out is stuff that's washed away in almost every other class selection that grants these proficiencies by virtue of the class. So humans were our C tier, or I'm sorry, B tier. Dragonborn unfortunately sits at a C tier, but it's like S tier in my heart, you know? Like I want it. This is the one that if I were to play a D&D campaign, I want to play a Oath of Vengeance paladin that is a Dragonborn. But unfortunately in Baldur's Gate 3, they don't really have a ton of fun capabilities. And that's really what this tier list is about, right? It's about rating the racial features here and the racial abilities. And the unfortunate thing is that the Dragonborn fall really short in this area, but they look so goddamn cool. So you kind of have to have the trade-off, I guess, right? So again, they run 30 feet, which is nice. It's standard medium size of racial feature here. But what the Dragonborn have is you choose a subrace that is a color of Dragonborn. And then that color corresponds to an element. So take, for example, Black Dragonborn, then have Acid Breath and Draconic Ancestry with resistance to that same damage type, which in this case, it's Acid. Or Blue is Lightning and resistance to Lightning. Or Brass is Fire. And to be specific, Fire, Breath, and a Lion, there's another one that's not like that. Bronze is Lightning again. Copper is Acid. Gold is Fire in a cone. So on and so forth. You can see the trend that we're taking here. But that's it. So unless you're really trying to meta pick a specific Dragonborn, like this one right here, the Gold Dragon or the Red Dragon, both being resistant to fire, which is the most prevalent damage type in the game, then you don't really get to take advantage of the features. And what's more important here is Fire Breath. It used to be terrible at the start of the game when the game first came out, because you could only use it once per long rest, and this is the damage it did for the entirety of the game. Well, now it will scale. It will do 2d6, which is 2 to 12 damage, and then at level 11, which is a long way to wait, it becomes 4d6, which is 4 to 24. And it now recharges on a long rest. Short rest. So you can at least use it more. I think the problem, though, is that it does recharge on a short rest. So I think otherwise it would be a little too broken. Maybe that's the caveat to what I'm saying. But it happens to be that because of that short rest, I don't really get to use this thing as much as I really want to for being a Dragonborn. And the damage scaling on it is just like a little too late. I wish that this scaling would happen at level 4 and at level 9. Then I get to really use this through a lot of the meat of the game, or level 5 and level 9, something like that. Where level 11, there's still a lot of game left, but it's about the midpoint of Act 3. I want to be able to really bring this character online much in the same way that every other racial spell gets activated around level 5 or 6, because usually they're in sets of 3, and you get almost all of them online by at least the halfway point of the game. So that's kind of the downside here. Of course, the resistance is quite nice, and the look of the Dragonborn is just absolutely ace, but unfortunately they sit down in the C tier for just kind of being an average selection because they don't have many other things going for them. Next up here is the Half-Orc, and if you haven't noticed, what I'm doing is I'm going through all of the race selection choices that are either their entire package is good or they don't have any sub races. So it's easy for me to bounce around and keep this one kind of congruent display of information. So Half-Orc here is also an S tier because they are just one of the best martial choices you can take for anyone trying to do melee damage. You gain a proficiency in intimidation for free, which is nice. You get dark vision, not superior dark vision, but still dark vision nonetheless. And you get 2 very strong abilities. If you reach 0 hit points, you regain 1 hit point instead of becoming downed. If you're doing a solo honor mode playthrough, this is an amazing ability. Shadow Sorcerer now gets this too, baked into their subclass. You can get this activated too through other means, but just to have this on board with the character is really, really nice. Also, we get Savage Attacks, which is different than Savage Attacker. So a Savage Attack here is when you land a critical hit with a melee weapon attack, you deal an extra dice of weapon damage. Now, if you were to also use Savage Attacks, that is the damage dice that's being rolled. You instead of rolling 1, you roll 2 and choose the highest. Those two work hand in hand here. So if you're a critical hit with a melee weapon, you deal an extra dice of weapon damage. Now, if you have Savage Attacker, you then deal 2 weapon dice of damage that are, I think it's 3 actually, 3 for a critical hit. You get an additional weapon dice of damage, but all those weapon dice of damage are being given an advantage. So you're rolling 2 dice and choosing the highest of the 2. it just makes these such a strong martial character. But the thing here is melee weapon attack. So a ranged character can't benefit from this. A caster character can't benefit from this. But if you're playing a fighter, a paladin, a melee ranger, rogue with a new swashbuckler, a hexblade, anyone that wants to use melee damage in any way, shape, or form, any melee weapon attack, Savage Attacks is just so good. So Half-Orc for sure is an S tier. And I think it's one of the ones that is least played next to our next option, which is, you guessed it, the Gith. So the Gith have a bit of a rough look, and I think it's hard to get over. I have a Gith character that is male, and I've always, I often make the joke, this is the crackhead version. The female version looks way better, just has better proportions and everything like that. And it's an overall more appealing character. But mine is a male, and he looks like he owns a barbershop. And the Gith is really damn good. They're really good. They almost sit in a tier of their own. They're so great because the Gith gets tons of unique items that are Gith exclusive, or they are unique items that if you are a Gith, you pull more advantage out of. Like, hey, I'm a Gith, so I then can do 1 to 4 psychic damage when I use this weapon, but everyone else can use it. So it's cool that the weapons and items that they can use are not Gith exclusive, but they get more benefit if they are Gith. So there's that. And before we even get into anything else here, they have the most narrative flair of any racial choice in the game because they're just so they're so tied into the narrative of Baldur's Gate 3. So Vlaakith and everything like that, like all of this plays such a heavy role in this that almost every single time you talk to any character in the story, there is some sort of Gith related answer. And it's really cool. It's a very specific style or an approach to the game too. It makes for a lot of fun as either a Dark Urge or resisting Dark Urge playthrough, depending on how you want to do things. So medium-sized race, so they move 30 feet, 9 meters. Astral Knowledge is a crazy good ability. So you gain proficiency in all skills corresponding to a chosen ability. So let's say then we're playing a barbarian, which means we don't have any charisma. If I use Astral Knowledge charisma, I get proficiency in all of the conversation skills so that I can go about doing whatever I need to do conversationally as a character that is completely inept. So being proficient in it means I get that bonus of your proficiency bonus, right? It's just a really, really strong one here. Strength, Dex, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. And it lasts until a long rest, and you can only use it once per long rest. So again, if you're playing a barbarian, you go through a long rest, you put Astral Knowledge charisma on you from now on, and now you can deal with conversations a little bit better. Or you put it on dexterity if you want to help pick chests or locks or whatever, and you don't have those skills. So this capability really allows you to become a jack of all trades in every situation. Now, when it comes to the custom kit here for the Gith, they also have some of the best custom spells, like their psionics as they're called. And they have Mage Hand, which you don't need to worry about ever getting resisted, but you use Mage Hand to go have it trigger a switch that shuts off a bunch of traps. You can use it to push things that you need to get narratively for quests. Mage Hand is a super versatile ability, and you get a free cast of it once per long rest. Then you get Enhanced Leap, which can be really fun for certain portions of the early portions of the game where you need to do certain jump puzzles and whatnot. You can just use Enhanced Leap, which allows you to leap up very high, but also leap down very easily. So it's a really great ability. And then lastly, one of the strongest ones, and like I said, this is at character level 5. Remember we talked about Dragon Breath and how that scales for the first time at level 9 and then the level 11? That just is no fun for me. So Misty Step here is great because it gives us a ton of mobility, especially even if you're not a melee class. Having a free pocket Misty Step is really strong because you're probably going to have it in a piece of gear and you're probably going to have it as a caster as well. So just having this and not have it take up something is really nice. Recharges once every long rest, and you don't have to worry about any of these getting resisted if you don't have the proper casting modifier, which is nice because you don't have to worry about a casting modifier in 3 spells that do not attack things. Then you get Martial Prodigy. So we talked about the martial skill of humans and how it's just kind of lackluster, right? No one really wants to use a lot of those things. But I talked about how in the case of the Drow, you do want to use a lot of those things. The hand crossbow, the short sword, the rapier, those are all great weapons. But Martial Prodigy allows you to play a wizard with light and medium armor proficiency, as well as short sword, long swords, and great swords. You could be a Gith wizard using a 2-handed sword and medium armor if you so wish. So you can have a lot of fun. It gives you a lot of variety into almost every single character class you choose with the Gith, because you open the door to most of the important weapons in the game, which are almost entirely short swords, long swords, and great swords. There are a lot of really good maces and flails, but I'm saying that the majority of the really standout ones fall within one of these three categories. Some of the best armor in the game too is medium armor. Armor of agility is really damn good. So just to point all those things out, it's why Gith is clearly an S tier. And as you can see, they get tons of exclusive equipment that you can wear and not be Gith, but if you are Gith, it makes it even better because you get a little bit more. Like this is an example. The Psionic Revenge, it does something else, but also grants +1 to intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws if you are a Gith. So it makes a lot of sense why this would be a S tier choice. Coming back to our A tier, we have elves. Now, both the Wood and the High Elf are quite good. Prior to patch 8, I would have put the High Elf in the B tier and kept the Wood Elf in the A tier, but we're going to go through why they both have a really great slot in that A tier. Again, medium race, so both moving 9 meters to 30 feet per turn, or 30 feet per turn. They get a free proficiency in perception, just like their Drow cousins. And then they get that proficiency this time, though, with long swords, short swords, longbows, and short bows, giving them access to a wide range of really fun combat abilities, especially too. Getting access to short bows and long bows, there's a lot of really good ones in the game. You don't need proficiency in them to have them and get their benefits, but you can now use them if you want, if you're stuck in a hard situation, or long swords or short swords, if you want to use those on any of your caster characters that otherwise wouldn't get access to them. Or furthermore, like a rogue, I think rogues don't get access to long swords, or druid, who I know doesn't get access to long swords. Those are some examples where you could really take some benefit here. Dark vision as well. Fey Ancestry, the same one we get from the Drow, which is advantage on saving throws about being charmed and being put to sleep. Both awesome choices. So that's just our base kit as an elf. But now when we go to the sub race, we go to the High Elf. High Elf can choose a cantrip from the wizard spell list. Note that this means these cantrips use intelligence as a casting stat. That's important because if you're using Shadowheart, she is a high half-elf. Her Firebolt, which misses a lot, is because it uses intelligence, and she is a cleric, so she doesn't have natural high intelligence. But what you don't see on this list here is Booming Blade. Booming Blade is a new cantrip that was added with patch 8, and it does not require an intelligence roll to hit. It's a weapon attack, but it does an additional 1d6 of thunder damage. That's huge. And it doesn't matter what you're doing, what class you're playing, if it's melee or non-melee, you still get that benefit. So it's a really nice capability to use. It's why this one is an easy A tier now rather than a B tier, because it just gives you the ability to turn Booming Blade on for every single class that you want to use it on that is in melee. That is a huge benefit. And then of course you have access to all these other cool cantrips that you can take advantage of, which are great. Blade Ward still, if you didn't want to go with Booming Blade in your melee class, this is a really, really good one. And you don't need to worry about saves on it. Next is our Wood Elf subrace, which gains that same proficiency in perception, but now gets a proficiency in stealth checks. So if I'm playing a ranger, if I'm playing a bard, if I'm playing a rogue, and I want to make it a stealthier character, I don't need to waste a proficiency here. I just get it by default. Or if I'm playing a caster and I wanted to stealth around, I now can do it. But the biggest thing here too about the Wood Elf is they get an extra 5 feet of movement. They are the fastest race in the game next to their half-elf counterparts. So Wood Elf half-elves get the exact same benefit. So this makes the Wood Elf and the High Elf both solid A tier choices. Since we talked about their full-blooded kin, let's go into the half-elves. So to start off, we're going to talk about the High Half-Elf, which is still an A tier. The problem with the half-elf is they suffer from the same thing that the human does, and they get civil militia. So spears, pikes, halberds, glaives, light armor, and shields. It's not the best kit of weapon proficiency because of how niche all the pole arms are in this game. You have to have a very specific playstyle to match those, or an intention behind them if you're going to choose those as weapon proficiencies. And again, light armor's scarcity, not light armor scarcity, but light armor's prevalence as a proficiency that comes with most classes makes it as a racial feature not as awesome. but we still get dark vision and we still get Fey ancestry, which gives us that advantage on saving throws against being charmed and being put to sleep. But the high half-elf gets that same cantrip benefit that their full-blooded cousins get. So even though it's not on this list because it's not been updated, they will get access to Booming Blade as well. This turns on the same capabilities that you would get. Now, one thing to take note of here too is that all half-elves can have facial hair. No elves can. So depending on how you are, I mean, I'm bald and have a beard. So that for me is like an S tier thing, but I'm like, I gotta be a realistic here, I guess. So in this picture, it doesn't show it, but you can have beards on all of your half-elves, which is something you cannot do on a normal elf. It's worth noting as a difference between these two because of that human ancestry, but this is what keeps the high elf in the A tier over their wood elf half-elf cousin, which is next. So the wood half-elf is still great because you get all the benefits of being a wood elf, which is that proficiency in stealth check and that movement speed increased by 5 feet. But you lose all the benefit of being an elf. So you don't have the same proficiencies. You now have that militia proficiency. It's just not as strong of a kit compared to the wood elf. If I'm looking at them side by side, I guess you could say, hey, they get a beard, man. Keep them in that A tier. But no, the wood half elf falls to B tier because they get all the good things of the wood elf, but they now get the bad things that the human gets, which is that civil militia and having the polearm specific proficiencies, which are, again, like I said before, are very niche picks. And our last half elf is the Drow. Now, this should naturally be an S plus tier because, you know, Drow are my favorite, but let's be realistic. It's an A tier because they are not full-blooded Drow, so they lose their proficiency bonus, but they still get their access to their Drow magic, which is still quite good. It is worth noting here that this uses the charisma. I said Drow magic used intelligence before. I made a mistake. It is charisma for Drow magic. So just keep that in mind. That Dancing Light, Fairy Fires, and Darkness all use charisma when it comes to your Drow half-elf. Again, though, if you want to play a Drow with a beard, this is how you would do it. And I know I'm harping on that a lot, but it is a strong characteristic to take advantage or to be aware of, because I was going to make my Drow on stream the other day, and I was like, oh, that's right, I can't make a beard. I have to be a Drow half-elf, which is what I did for one of our other playthroughs. So Drow half-elf sits in the A tier because it still benefits from all the great spells that Drow has, but it loses out because it still has civil militia for its proficiencies. The dwarfs sit in a really weird spot. They have a really amazing subrace, they have a pretty good one, and they have a not so good one. So they are a medium-sized race, but they move as a small race with the 20 feet per turn because they are quite stocky, them folk. Their combat training gives them proficiency in battle axes, hand axes, light hammers, and war hammers. There are a pretty good amount of light hammers and war hammers in the game, so they do get advantage to some really cool, fun weapons, and there's quite a lot of really cool battle axes, so you can take advantage of that. Well, really cool Reddit post I saw a long time ago when the game first came out was I'm playing a Duergar, which is, you know, the evil dwarfs, the Underdark dwarfs, with a battle axe, and I'm a wizard, and it feels so cool. I'm like, damn, that's a cool little RP ditty right there. Dark vision though, so they can see 40 feet, and then they get dwarven resilience. So all dwarves get access to all of this, and dwarves here, that dwarven resilience is going to give them a resistance to poison, and they get advantage on saving throws against poison. But this section here is about the gold dwarf, which sits in A tier, which isn't terrible because the gold dwarf is the stockiest of all the races in the game, because this subrace feature is very simple, but it's very good. Your hit point max increases by 1 and increases by 1 again every time you gain a level. This makes it so that you can have the highest health pool in the game if you choose a gold dwarf here and go, let's just say, pure barbarian. That is the highest hit point pool in the game. You will outclass everyone of equal level and subclass split as a gold dwarf in their hit points because of this feature. So if you want to make a really strong, stocky tank character, gold dwarf is really cool here because they will naturally have that much more hit points that scales across all 12 levels in Baldur's Gate 3. So if the gold dwarf was an A tier, unfortunately, the shield dwarf sits at a C tier. The shield dwarf here, it only gets proficiency in light and medium armor. Medium armor proficiency is it's not bad, right? Because it talked about how good it is for other races that get access to it, like the Gith. But the fact is that it's all they get in addition to the other two, which are just so much better. Having one additional hit point plus another additional hit point per level is so good. And then getting access to all the stuff I'm about to say with the Duergar is so good. And then when you get the medium armor one, okay, I mean, cool. If I'm playing a shield dwarf that's a caster, like a sorcerer or a warlock or a bard that's not going sword bard, and a warlock that's not going hexblade, and a wizard again, or a sorcerer, like I said, then I get access to medium armor, and I can use a great axe. So there is fun in that. I'm not saying that this is a terrible choice. I'm saying that this choice has to have a clear-cut decision on what you're doing. Like, okay, I'm choosing a shield dwarf because I want to turn on medium armor proficiency for free and take advantage of the weapon proficiencies or whatever else it is to use a specific armor type in the game. And I think that's probably the most telling thing of everything in the C tier. It's, hey, you have to have a very set narrative in your head for why you want to play a shield dwarf, which is fine, or you want to have a very specific play style in mind for, hey, I want this proficiency so I can pull the most out of it for a play style I have in mind. And lastly, we have the Duergar for the dwarfs. They sit at an S tier. Some would put them in an S plus tier because they're just that good. And I think too, Deep Gnomes, Duergar, and Drow, all Underdark races, are all the best of their counterparts, and also they are thematically and narratively the most involved in the story. So they have a lot of really fun choices to go about because you'll interact quite a bit with both Duergar and Deep Gnome in the game, as well as Drow. So the three of them, the interaction with each other is pretty robust. So there's that huge narrative chunk before getting into anything else. There's also a single item in the game that isn't Duergar specific, but it is it's small race specific, I believe. Subrace features, though, they get superior dark vision, and then they get Duergar resilience. So we get that saving. We already get the dwarf benefit, right? So advantage on saving throws and resistance to poison. But now they get advantage on saving throws against illusions and against being charmed or paralyzed. It's a huge gamut of stuff that they get advantage on, which is really nice. And then they get their Duergar magic. So they can cast Enlarge. So it does not quite matter if they are a medium-sized race, they're going to become a large race quite quick. And then they also get Invisibility, which can be used and abused quite a bit through all the characters that can really take advantage of invisibility and use it for any kind of stealthy kind of fun action. But this might not seem like a whole big kit. This Duergar resilience is massive. Like being immune to charm and paralyze, which becomes extremely prevalent in Act 3, just keeps you online for so long. And Enlarge in and of itself is a really good cantrip. Grow in size to become stronger. You gain advantage on ability checks and saving throws using strength, and weapon attacks deal an additional 1d4. So it's why using this is really good. Casting a spell at a higher level does not grant any benefits, but you use this and your character is huge. So you get the advantage of being stronger, and you get advantage on saving on strength checks and saving throws on strength checks. So you can really use and abuse this to do a ton of damage, to really amp up if you're playing a melee character, or even if you're trying to be a little bit stockier as a caster. It just gives you such fun utility. And invisibility too is really strong to be able to pop into invisible and then maybe open up with a sneak attack, cause an ambush, whatever it is. It opens up a ton of gameplay options that are unique for you that other people can't take advantage of, and you don't even need to use anything. It's just not a spell slot. It's a recharge per battle, not long rest. So you can use this a lot in your playthrough rather than this is just once per long rest. So, and also does not require concentration, does not use spell slots. So both of those things are so strong about the kit for the Duergar. It makes them such a standout pick. Since we ended things with the Duergar, let's go into the Gnome, where the Deep Gnome doth reside, but that is not the first one we're going to talk about. We're going to go into the Rock Gnome. So the Gnome is a size small creature with 25 feet per turn, or 7.5. They get a really great Gnome Cunning, which is you have advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws. All three of those are great, and this is very strong. I think my choices, or where my placements are for Gnome, is not going to be popular. I think most people would choose this, or to choose them to exist in different tiers. I was like, what was I going to say here? But this Gnome Cunning is a very strong capability. So that exists in and of itself. All gnomes take advantage of it, but Rock Gnome here, unfortunately, is the weakest of the gnomes sitting at C tier. It does get dark vision, which is cool, but it just gets to add proficiency bonus to add twice your proficiency bonus. So it's basically specialized in history checks. That's it. That's the only thing it's got going for it. So for me, again, this has to exist as a true narrative choice because I think rock gnomes are really cool narratively. So you would choose this character, this race for a narrative decision over a in-game feature situation because they just don't have feature. They don't really have anything fun going for them. History checks are, I think there's maybe a total of 10 in the whole entire game. There's 1 or 2 that happen in conversation. So it's not anything I just need at a dire clutching moment. Forest gnomes, though, move this up just a little bit. Forest gnomes for me exist in B tier because they do simply have the same thing that rock gnomes suffer from in that they just have dark vision, but they get speak with animals. And you might not think that's good, but I cast it every single time after a long rest. It lasts until long rest, and there's quite a lot of interaction with animals in this game that allows you to not have to worry about this on a character. You don't have to waste a spell, not a spell slot in the cast because it's a ritual spell, but waste readying it. It can be kind of tedious to always have this up. You don't have to worry about using the potions for it or anything like that. Just having speak with animals bound to the character is really great because you just always have access to it without having to tap into it from another class. It's why it's in a B tier rather than a C tier. And again, you still get gnome cunning in both the rock gnome and the forest gnome, keeping them up in that strong B tier. So like all the other Underdark themed races, the deep gnomes are definitely up there. So again, there's a narrative thing here. There's tons of narrative interaction with the deep gnomes, like I said before, with the drow and with the Duergar, and it's so true here with the deep gnomes. So 80 feet for their superior dark vision. They also get advantage on stealth checks, which is really good. And then they get all the stuff that makes it being blah, 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 blah. All the stuff that's really great about being a gnome, right? Their advantages on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma checks. All these things in conjunction just work so well to put this into S tier because advantage on stealth checks might not seem like a lot, but it is huge. Being able to pop into stealth through cunning stealth in the middle of a combat is really great. Advantage on it so you can actually skulk around and do a lot of things. Stealthing is a big part of this game, you know, the classic stealth archer argument, but it's really nice to be able to just have advantage on it. I think they're the only race that gets advantage on stealth, or is it halflings as well? Yeah, them and halflings, because the other one is proficiency in stealth, I believe. But either way, it's one of the few advantages on stealth that you get access to, and it's quite good in conjunction with all the other advantages you get towards your saving throws on charisma, intelligence, and wisdom. Jumping into our last set of sub races, we have the Tiefling, which is also another one of my favorite races. We have dark vision for them at 40 feet. They move 9 meters and 30 feet per turn, and then they get hellish resistance. So they have resistance to all fire damage, which is huge. Remember, that's the most prevalent damage type in the game. But our first one is Asmodeus Tiefling, which sits at the A rank for me. Now, all Tieflings have special spells that come with each one of their sub races. For this one, all of their spells require charisma, but the hellish rebuke and darkness produce flame. You don't have to worry about it. Darkness is good no matter what, even if there's resistances going on. So it's a great one to drop down. Hellish rebuke still casts at a level 2, which makes it a 3d10 response to any kind of damage coming your way, spell damage. If it gets resisted, it gets resisted. It replenishes on a long rest. It's mainly darkness, and darkness we've already talked about with the drow is just that good. So I would use both these in conjunction more than I would with the next one coming up, Mephistopheles Tiefling, which isn't terrible. Actually, the one we just did in our playthrough is a Mephistopheles Tiefling, but it's because I'm going with a charisma playthrough. Mage Hand is a really strong cantrip, so I'm not. It's a cantrip too, so I can use it multiple times. So keep that in mind. Burning Hands is great, but if I don't have charisma, it just gets resisted. It is casted at level 2, which is great. And Flame Blade, which is really good, you need charisma for it to actually hit because it takes over for your spellcasting modifier for the damage being done. So if you're a warrior using Flame Blade, rather than your strength for the Flame Blade, it's going to use charisma. So that's why the Mephistopheles Tiefling for me sits in a B tier, 1 tier below Asmodeus, because these things are so much more dependent on certain situations or certain combinations to get them online to actually do the damage they need to do. And last one is truly actually my favorite one in Zariel Tiefling, because I like the whole like martial or warrior type of thing. Go figure. And it's because they sit in C tier because of their smites. Searing Smite and Branding Smite, I just never use the smites. And the nice thing here is that these use Constitution, which is cool. The other ones use Charisma, right? So the Tiefling spells here for this use Constitution, which allows them to actually hit. But if I'm playing a Barbarian, I can't use them because I'll already have been enraged. Looking at you, Karlak. If I'm playing a Warrior, sure, I can use them. That's about the only time I'd want to use it. But the problem with smites is that they use your bonus action. So it's a full committal in one turn that could ultimately result in a big whiff until you get extra attack that you can pull an additional attack out if you do miss. So that's why, unfortunately, Zariel Tieflings for me sit at the C tier because it's not reliable damage, and I need reliable damage out of a character that's supposed to be quote unquote martial. Thaumaturgy, on the other hand, is a really great cantrip, so they've got that going for them. So at that, it brings our video here to a close. We've covered every single one of the races and all of their sub races, which ones I think belong where on what part of the list. And as you can see, here is the entire tier list. We have a lot of stuff at S and A, not as much in B, and even less in C. And I think that's a pretty good little quote unquote bell curve for this, to have a lot more stronger situation, or a lot stronger, not more stronger, a lot stronger situations rather than weaker ones. And remember, the weaker ones, they're not bad. It's just that they don't have as many sub-race features or spells or whatever as the other ones. So that's why they're there. They're being compared against each other versus their quote unquote viability in the game. As I said at the beginning of this video, a Dragonborn is badass. They're so goddamn cool. Make a Dragonborn. I encourage you to make one. Yeah, I love Drow. Of course they're in my S tier, but they're also in S tier because they're really good too. So playing a C tier in this or an S tier in that, it's not going to matter. What matters ultimately is what you enjoy out of this game. It's a single player narrative game. Who cares if something's underpowered, overpowered, or just okay? As long as you're beating it. And the true difficulty in this game is the understanding of the game's mechanics through action and bonus action, unless your choices in your race, class, or subclass selection. Those things only help to push you further. You could be playing the best race with the best class, with the best subclass, with the best multi-class, and the best gear. But if you don't know how to manage your actions and bonus actions, you're just going to fail no matter what. So please take this list with a grain of salt, but also at the same time, let me know how you would move this around. Do you think that all the gnomes deserve to be up an entire tier, if not all the way up to A or B tier? Whatever it is, let it be known in the comment section below. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.